Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power tends to corrupt absolutely. This is a quote from Lord Acton, where he presents the dilemma that the more a person gains power to influence the world around him, the more tyrannical he gets. But why is that? And so today, in our exploration on analysis of power dynamics, we're going to use the idea of flow, which I'm piggybacking off this guy. I can't say his name, so just read it on the screen, to better understand and see how one's psychology is affected, what sort of cognitive shifts take place when someone pertains and gains power, so that we can better understand the dilemma that Lord Acton brought up. The first cognitive shift that takes place by power is a reduction in empathy. The more elevated a person becomes in power structures, the more social distance they experience from others. And over time, this distance erodes the ability to accurately model the experiences, emotions, and needs of others. Neuroscientific studies have shown that individuals in high-status roles display lower neural responses in brain regions associated with empathy, and thus leaders may become numb to the suffering of others, not because they're malevolent, there we go, but because their feedback loops are no longer grounded in lived social reciprocity. I really am using words I can't say. Anyways, this can lead to a few things. Policy decisions appearing out of touch, failure to recognize symbolic weight of actions on marginalized groups, and finally, increased reliance on abstract metrics over real human impact. The other sort of cognitive shift that takes place is the illusion of control. As individuals rise to power, they perceive their success as something extremely good, to the point that it conflates with the idea of personal infallibility. They seem to assume that outcomes are results of their will or intelligence rather than systems, timings, or support networks. This illusion leads to overconfidence in risky scenarios, strategic overreach, particularly in war or economic manipulation, and a failure to course correct when reality contradicts expectations. And here are some historical examples. A famous one is Napoleon's invasion of Russia, where, driven by an overestimation of French military control over nature and distance, and thus Napoleon firmed it out by General Winter of Russia. Of course, Silicon Valley tech magnates, they're a good example because they believe social engineering can replace governance itself through their tech, which we know is not true. And then modern autocrats who assume they can rewrite demographics, ecological, or technological realities through decree. We don't have to look further than the one-child policy China had for a long time. The final sort of cognitive shift that takes place is the collapse of useful and moderating feedback. The collapse of authentic feedback channels is very dangerous in this case, because the higher one rises, the more they become surrounded by yes men, flattery, and carefully filtered information. Thus, criticisms become career suicide for subordinates. Advisors could begin to compete to reinforce but not challenge the leader's worldview, and leaders begin to live in curated reality tunnels, which increasingly diverges from the ground level truth or the shared lived reality that we everyday people experience. Thus, the ultimate irony is revealed, that while it does give a person agency to do what they want, they lose their awareness of what's around them as a result. Because leaders often believe that they are masters of their fate, even though their ability to perceive consequences degrade. And this tension between expanded influence and diminished clarity is the central paradox of high-level leadership. The work on flow stasis by the guy I mentioned earlier, name is on the screen, notes that optimal human functioning happens when people are in a state of intense challenge, immediate feedback, and personal engagement. In contrast, power creates the opposite conditions. Low challenges because subordinates remove obstacles for them, delayed or false feedback due to hierarchical insulation, and emotional disengagement due to depersonalized decision making. In other words, power pulls people out of the flow state. It replaces their dynamic responsiveness with static commands, and in doing so, lead many powerful individuals towards boredom, paranoia, or detachment. This is why some of the most disastrous leadership collapses happen not out of malevolence, but entropy. Leadership stop thinking because the systems around them have stopped requiring them to think. Is there a way, though, to escape the Lord Acton's dilemma? I don't think so, but there are a few ways we can mitigate this dilemma. One is by institutionalizing contradictions. Structures like constitutional checks, loyal opposition parties, and rotating councils can serve a way to mitigate the risk of somebody being very insulated from their counter or opposing views. Also, power must be temporarily limited and merit-based and situationally adapted. The goal here is not to prevent strength, but to surround it with filters that force introspection. We can also introduce ritualized humility. Some ancient cultures, like those found in African chieftain systems, shame was used ritualistically against leaders once they made a major decision to represent symbolic regrounding, so that the leader doesn't forget where he's coming from and who's being affected by his decisions. Also, we could use what some Native American tribes do, which they practice reverse feedback ceremonies where leaders were forced to listen without speaking up to public critique. We can modernize this with anonymous internal review mechanisms, deliberate information, asymmetry simulations, and also adversarial advisory teams, those that model alternative future scenarios to disrupt delusional certainty. And also, we must restore flow into power structure in the first place. Leaders function best when they remain mentally present, emotionally engaged, and cognitively challenged. This means surrounding oneself with not flattery, but worthy adversaries, diverse thinkers, and data flows that challenge their assumptions. The goal is not omniscience, but rather resilience through friction itself. Thus lies my conclusions on Lord Acton's dilemma. It's often, people sometimes say that in the pursuit of justice, I hope I don't become a villain. The villain here is your inability to see where your actions lead and being tunnel visioned into a very egoist echo chamber because you're the man with power, and often those around you want to use your power for them to gain what little they can as a result of being associated with you. And you don't have to be the president to feel this. You could be a principal, you could be anybody really. But the main point is that by essentially challenging our views every day, we can prevent ourselves from becoming tyrants in the first place. That's all I have to say. This is the penultimate episode, so let me know what you think down in the comments below, and see you in the last one.